Well, this is Ty Yokum. I'm with Measured Results Consulting, where our purpose is to help organizations grow their results by training and developing their leadership. And at Measured Results, we see training as a process, not as an event. So we measure all of our training, its effectiveness, to ensure that you get the results that you want. And today we have the distinct pleasure of having Mr. Shane Benson with us, who is a senior VP of operations at Chick-fil-A Inc., the support center. Shane, welcome, my friend. How
Ty,
the heck are you?
Ty, I'm so glad to be here and to get to spend some time catching up with you and talking about, one of my favorite topics, and that's people. So, and how to
Wow.
help people be better. So, appreciate the invite.
Well, you are a people person, Shane Benson. Every time I see you, you're smiling and it's contagious. So thanks for being the guy that you are. And hey, thank you for being willing to give us some of your precious time today.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, where did that come from? My pleasure.
That
Wow.
that's years and years of indoctrination at Chick-fil-A. Let me just tell you,
There's a little
you
brainwashing
can't
going
help
on.
yourself. You can't help yourself. Yeah,
So
I love it.
Shane, today, what I really want to talk to you about is what one of the principles of leadership is really showing, I think, care and concern for others. And the reason why I wanted to invite you is because I think you being the senior VP of operations at Chick-fil-A probably know better than anybody else how Chick-fil-A does this so well. And so we're going to pick your brain a little bit today, if that's okay with you.
Oh, it'd be a pleasure.
Yeah, so let me just share this real quick with the audience. In 2020, Chick-fil-A decided to make a little bit of a move in the direction of what their ultimate goal was, and they were obviously a very visionary company, as Shane would attest to, but their goal became to be the world's most caring company. Now, think about that for a second. Not the country's most caring company, but the world's most caring company. So, Shane, talk to that for a second. Tell me a little bit about how that came about at Chick-fil-A.
Well, first, when I hear you say that, it feels so humbling because I can think of multiple occasions when it may not feel like that. Let's just be honest. I mean, we are a company that works very hard, tries very hard on a daily basis. We've got some tremendous franchisees across the country that work hard each and every day to, and being very intentional about trying to care for guests that come in the restaurant each and every day. But I will say, at the end of the day, you kind of have to ask yourself the question, okay, why are we in business? I mean, what are we doing this for? And really, our founder, Truett Cathy, was famous for saying, we're in the people business. We just
Mm,
happen to sell chicken.
mm,
And so when you think about that, it's not really about sales goals and profit margins. It's more about people and the
mm,
progress of people through this brand called Chick-fil-A. And that not only goes for the staff that works here, but the team members that work in the restaurants, our franchisees, but most importantly, those customers that come in contact each and every day with Chick-fil-A. And we'd like to think that that ice cream that's combined with a smile goes a long way, and it allows people to feel cared for in some really special ways. It's fascinating as we do this interview. We're in the midst of COVID-19,
mm,
and what we've realized is there are some really unique things that we've been able to do through our drive-throughs, through curbside delivery, through on-demand delivery that exemplify care to
mm.
people. And it's the little things, right? It's the smile that you get in the drive-through, but it's making sure your food's hot. It's making sure that it's accurate. And we just are really conscientious about trying to do those things. And we'll get into it, but we have a little bit of an equation that we use to define care that I think is helping us as we are on this journey together.
I love that. That is what we're going to explore in just a few minutes, but I want to take you back to March of this year. And this is 2020 is one of those, needless to say, very memorable years for all of us. But in March is when we began to see this virus, this contagious virus hit our country, and things changed pretty rapidly. So before the virus came along, though, Chick-fil-A had already turned the corner, and they said, this is our goal, to become the world's most caring company. So before the virus, what was Chick-fil-A doing in your mind to demonstrate showing care and concern for those that they serve?
Well, especially in a world where, life is so busy, there's so many distractions, there's so much going on. It's fascinating. We're in the restaurant business, and if you go back to the root of what restaurant means, it's actually restore. It's a place, or it should be a place of restoration. And so you come to a restaurant, and whether you know it or not, you actually come there to get some form of restoration.
Mm,
So
mm,
when you pull back and you actually think about that phrase, well, what does that mean to you as a consumer? Well, it could be that just means that you're a mom with a couple kids, and there's a playground, and you just need a break. I mean, one of my favorite stories, even as I was serving a guest in a restaurant, was I walked back into the corner of the restaurant. There was a lady there, and she had a large lemonade. And as you know, we like to refresh beverages at Chick-fil-A, get a refill, the customer a refill. And so I went to her and I said, "Ma'am, can I refresh your beverage?" And she said, "Oh, that would be I'm so grateful." So I went back and I got her a large lemonade. And I came back and she was crying. And immediately I thought, is my finger in the cup? Did I do something wrong? What happened here? And I hand her the lemonade, and she looks at me, and I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she said, "I just want you to know this is the first time that anybody has done anything for me in a month. My husband's deployed. I
mm.
came here because this is the only place that I knew I could get a break from it all. My kids are screaming in the playground, and I could care less because I got an ice cold, large lemonade, and I'm just going to sip on it here in this corner." And she just said, "I just want to tell you thank you."
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
that to me exemplifies what restoration and care is all about. She came to Chick-fil-A, a fast food restaurant, to feel cared for.
And it was the simple act of refilling her lemonade that just touched her
Ty,
heart.
you know what she said to me? She said, "Do you know why I got the large? Because I knew I wouldn't be able to get up. I've got to keep an eye on the kids, and
Oh
I
my.
got the large." And she didn't know we refresh beverages, and
Wow.
that was just a powerful moment for me. It's one that I've never forgotten,
That's a great
because
story.
it was so symbolic of really the little things that we have an opportunity to do,
Mhm,
no matter where you're at. But specifically in the restaurant business, we have opportunities each and every day. We call them these moments. We have these
mhm.
moments that if we take advantage of, they can be carefully crafted and full of care when we do so. Yeah.
I love that story, Shane, and it does speak to how Chick-fil-A does things a little bit differently, right? Uh, it is our pleasure to serve our guests, and a simple act of refreshing a beverage, we just don't know what's happening in that other person's world.
Yeah.
Um, I love that story. So that's a great example of probably how life was before the pandemic, right? You could refresh beverages inside the restaurant. But things changed come March of 2020. And so I'm just curious, you're the big dog there in operations at Chick-fil-A. You're the executive VP. I'm gonna call you executive VP because you're executive in my eyes, Shane. But so when that all happened, what changed? How did you guys position yourselves to continue to show care for your guests and even for you team members and operators? Any stories come to mind?
Yeah, I think several. And, what happened in March feels about like 10 years ago. I don't know. And, I know some of our listeners, this has been, I mean, where did 2020 go? Because it's like,
Let it
what?
go though, man.
Yeah, let
Let
it
it
go.
go.
I'm ready. I'm ready for 2021. How about you?
Yeah.
But, as I reflect, I think there are certain things, there are things that you need to be certain of in uncertain times.
Mm,
And I think one of those is, okay, what's our purpose here? What are we ultimately trying to do? And if we're ultimately trying to care for people, that's something that we're certain of. Okay, we're certain that there are behaviors that we exhibit that make people feel cared for. So in the midst of uncertain times, we teach our team members a couple key things. We call them the core four. Well, we're certain they work. Where they work before COVID, they
mm,
work during COVID, and they'll work after COVID. And that is,
mm.
hey, it's really easy. Make eye contact. Make eye contact, because we don't get enough of that, especially in today's world. But make eye contact. Smile. Just smile. Even with a mask on, it's amazing how you can smile with your eyes,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Speak enthusiastically and stay connected.
Mm,
Those are four truths, four principles that we try and teach every single team member that comes into the doors of Chick-fil-A. And if you'll do these four things, people will feel cared for. They're
yes.
pretty simple, and we're certain about that, even in the midst of uncertain times. Now, the things that had to change were things like, we got to wear a mask.
Mm,
I mean, we've got to adopt wearing masks across all of our team members. We're going to have to go outside and wait on customers because they can't come inside. So we're going to have to adopt some new policies and procedures on outside. You may notice if you've gone through a Chick-fil-A, we don't hand the bag to you anymore. We put it on a tray, or we put it in a container. We hand that container over to you, and you grab your food from that. You'll see that we maintain or try to maintain 6-foot distancing. You'll see hand washing sinks and stations within the drive-through, because all of our team members need to be washing their hands about every 30 minutes. We had to put certain practices into our natural flow of how we serve guests, because honestly, things had changed. And
mm,
that became a customer expectation. And so what we found pretty quickly, Ty, is by doing those things, we already had trust with our customer, but it elevated the trust when they saw some of these things happening in our drive-thrus. And so they came up, and there was a confidence there when you came to a team member who was wearing a mask, who was staying socially distanced, who was washing their hands, who was wearing gloves. They were doing all the necessary things to ensure that you felt safe during uncertain times. And when
yeah.
you combine that with eye contact, a smile, with a person that speaks enthusiastically and stays connected with you through the experience, those things create, we hope, a moment that makes you feel cared for.
I think it's significant that something as simple as the core four, it works. And I think you said it so well. It worked before the pandemic and it'll work during the pandemic. So what do you attribute that to? Is it the connection with the guest? Is the core four some magic formula that Chick-fil-A came up with? Or you say it works. Why does it work, Shane? Why does it work?
I think there's an inherent human truth, um, that over time Chick-fil-A has tried to ensure is at the forefront of what we do. And that is, as people, we want to be treated with honor, dignity,
Mm,
and respect. And if I know that about myself, then that's probably the way I should treat my neighbor also. Treat my neighbor as I would want to be treated myself.
mm,
And so if we inherently know that everybody wants to feel honor, they want to feel dignity and respect, well, then therefore that's exactly what we should exhibit. And
mm,
so that's why, you know, we're not going to discriminate when you come in the restaurant. That's why we're going to treat you with honor and dignity and respect, because that's the way we would want to be treated. And
Yeah.
so, and that goes from the top down. That franchisee, it's amazing. I wish customers could see what was going on in that empty dining room right now. I mean, those condiment stations that were filled up with ketchup and mayonnaise and napkins are now filled up with candy and all kinds of goodies for team members. So when they come in off those shifts of working outside where it's super hot or cold or whatever it is, they're getting refreshed. They too are getting restored. And so when you've got franchisees that are treating their team members with
Mm,
honor, dignity, and respect,
mm.
those team members in turn want to treat customers with honor, dignity, and respect. And here's
Wow.
where, to me, I think the opportunity is created. And when a customer gets treated like that, they in turn, we hope, want to treat their family, their friends, and their coworkers with honor, dignity, and respect.
Mm.
When I feel cared for, I care for others. And when they feel cared for, they care for others. And that's really the truth with which we operate. It's like,
Mm.
hey, treat people with honor, dignity, respect, and we'll be successful. We're not worried about that, because that's a human truth that remains true throughout time.
Now that would be a virus we wouldn't need a vaccine for.
It's pretty contagious too.
You know,
Yeah,
think about
I
that.
agree.
I loved working there at Chick-fil-A. I think the main reason is because when you think about the work that we were doing, Shane, it was so much more than selling chicken, right? I mean, now we weren't selling chicken, the operators and their team were, but we were supporting those that were. But there was always, to me, it was sort of this higher calling. It was always the idea of we're doing so much more than just being a restaurant. We're maybe changing the culture in which we live one person at a time by showing them honor, dignity, and respect, and maybe demonstrating the core four, just
Mm.
changing the world one guest at a time. Um, so I always love that part of it. But tell me a little bit more. You were talking about an equation earlier, and I'm intrigued by that. Tell me a little bit more about what you were getting at there.
Well, and I will tell you, it's something that we've spent some time thinking about in regards to. So, what's our equation for care at Chick-fil-A?
Yep.
And we would put it in it's these two things that need to happen for us as people to feel cared for. And the first one is engagement, and the second one is execution. And I
Mm.
want to give you an example. I want you to imagine that, and it may have happened to you. I know it's happened to me, but you go to dinner with somebody, they invite you to dinner, and it's a really nice place. I mean, you talk about engaged. I mean, it's like, people are pulling out all the stops. Ma'am, can I get you this? Sir, can I get you this? It's nice. The meal's great. It's fantastic. But when it comes time to pay the bill, that person's got those alligator arms. They just don't. You end up paying the bill. So it was zero execution there. It's like, wait a minute, you just invited me and you're asking me to pay the bill. So engagement was high, execution was low. You kind of leave that experience wishing they would have cared a little bit more, right? And I'll point the
You're not
finger.
talking about the last time I invited you to dinner,
No,
are you, Shane?
absolutely not. But if you think about Chick-fil-A, think about the last time you went through a drive-through experience. You may have pulled up and that person was friendly. They made eye contact. They smiled. They spoke enthusiastically. They stayed connected. High engagement. But you can't eat your Chick-fil-A nuggets without two, and I say two Chick-fil-A sauces. And dadgummit, they forgot one of them. And you drive off and you're like, what happened? I don't have my second sauce. Now, are you totally upset? Maybe not. Maybe you give us a little grace. However, you leave that experience wishing they
Mm,
would have cared a little bit
mm,
more.
mm,
It's when you combine these two things,
mm,
high engagement and high execution, that's where we leave feeling cared for. Now,
mm,
we've all had those experiences where there was little to no engagement and little to no execution, and that's where we feel like people couldn't have cared less. They just didn't care. But it's really in these two areas that we find ourselves working really diligently each and every day, because oftentimes you may have high engagement, low execution, or high execution and low engagement. And those are the places where I wish you would have cared a little bit more.
Mm.
And so for us as a brand, we work really hard in those spaces because we want to really create these experiences that have high execution and high engagement. And when we do, we're pretty confident the customer leaves feeling cared for. And I think that translates really well. It's not a phenomenon that's just, valuable to Chick-fil-A or the restaurant industry. You think about the world that you're in right now as a listener, wherever you're at, whether that's in an office environment, a manufacturing environment, doesn't really matter. You come to the table with this same equation.
Mm.
How well you engage and how well you execute makes people feel cared for. When dad says, we're going to go to a movie next weekend for the premiere of Star Wars, and it's going to be awesome and off the charts, but he shows up late, I dropped the ball in one of those
Yeah.
areas. I didn't execute as well as I needed to, right?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I'll be the first guy to say there have been Valentine's days where Gina felt cared for, and there have been Valentine's days where Gina felt like I could have cared a little bit more. And so I think we all have this opportunity to think about how are we engaging and how are we executing. And that has been really a formula that's really working well for us as we think about how do we deliver care to our guests.
So I'm going to recap that. Care equals engagement plus execution. Yeah.
Correct.
And, I love that because it's so simple, but yet it's so hard to do, right? So, can you think of, and I'm going to put you on the spot just for a second, Shane, but can you think of an example of that in the Chick-fil-A world recently where that was done really, really well? And then I want you to contrast that maybe with an experience that you had recently where and it doesn't have to be Chick-fil-A, it could be somewhere else where that formula rang true and you went, they just dropped the ball on the engagement piece or they dropped the ball on the execution piece. Give me an example of the Chick-fil-A world where it worked and then another example somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I'll start by saying I think we've had a lot of this during COVID when customers drive up to a Chick-fil-A and they see 6 or 7 team members outside with
Mm.
face masks and iPads. They meet you at the car. They take your order and it is fast. I mean, you look up and you're like, you didn't even have time to check text messages. You're like through the drive-through and on your way. You leave that experience most of the time thinking, man, they know how to execute. I mean, it's been funny. You may have seen it. We see it because we're Chick-fil-A and people send us this stuff, but it said, if Chick-fil-A was in charge of figuring out a solution for COVID, we'd already be healed by now. It's like we take that with a lot of grace, right? But it's like, no, that is not true. But we appreciate it. We do appreciate it. But that's how customers have told us they feel. Like, wow, you guys know how to execute. I was in here
Yeah.
fast, and you also know how to engage. That team member was smiling at me. They stayed engaged with me. I really appreciate it. It's a friendly place to go.
Yeah.
People drive away feeling cared for. So that's probably, a good example of where people have felt care. I do think we have plenty examples of where people wish we would have cared a little bit more.
Mm.
And, I think about my own personal examples. There are times when I'm a huge curbside order. I don't like waiting in the drive-through. I like to just order my food, pull into a spot, and then somebody brings it out to me. A
Mm.
lot of customers have discovered that. Well, I noticed the other day that on a couple of occasions when I was driving in, that was not an option on the app.
Yes.
The signs are right there. It says curbside, but I couldn't do it. And so what had happened was the franchisee had decided, or the team member had decided, to turn that aspect off for that day. Maybe they were shorthanded. Doesn't Hey, there's probably a variety of reasons. I mean, honestly, somebody
Hmm.
could have been sick, could have been a really good excuse. But as a consumer, I'm speaking as a consumer, I was frustrated a little bit because I had in my head, this is how I want to receive and get my food. And so when they dropped, in my mind, when the bar was lowered for execution, I left that experience wishing they would have cared a little bit more about me.
Yes.
And I'm a customer of Chick-fil-A as well. And so I think we all have those examples, right? When you go to the grocery store and they're out of toilet paper, you give them a little grace, but if that lasts too long, you're like, where's the execution here, people? Like, you wish they would have done a different order, fixed it, figured it out, but you leave wishing they would have cared a little bit more. So again, the encouragement is, what can you do and where you are right now to engage at a high level and to execute at a high level? Because when you do, people in turn feel cared for.
And so I think it's important to talk about why we should do that too, beyond the fact that it's a simple thing of showing honor, dignity, and respect. Going back to something you said earlier, Shane. Why else? If I'm in an organization, what is the value to me if I do show care and concern for the guests that I'm taking care of? What's the end benefit of all of that?
Well, I
Or
think
what would be
if
some of the benefits?
No, I think it's a great question, and I think it's one that you've got to ask yourself.
Mm,
Um, I think you got to start with the question of, why am I here?
mm,
What is my purpose?
mm,
Um, if your purpose um, in the job that you have is to take care of your family, uh, to have a relationship with your coworkers, I think it can actually help you see past some of the work that you have to do and realize that that work is a means to an end.
mm.
And if work is just work, um, I don't know how long that can last, to be honest with you. And I would imagine, I think we've all been there, when you've got a job that doesn't is not in line with maybe a greater purpose in your life, sometimes that can be really hard.
Mm,
Now, a lot of times, people can get through that when there's a greater purpose in what that work can do for their family and what it can do for their community. So I got to go to work, but ultimately that's not what's most important. I keep that in balance because my purpose is what's driving me. So Ty, I think what I would encourage listeners to do is really take an inventory of, what does that work lead to?
mm,
What is it, a means to an end, and what's your end? What are you striving for? I for me personally, even at Chick-fil-A, and as much as I love what I get to do, I have to have some things in my life that are driving me, these sticky statements for roles that I have in my life. And one of them is, I just want to be a dad my kids love to hug.
mm,
And so how is my work helping me do that? What is it I can take from work back to home that would allow my kids to want to hug me? I want to be a leader others desire to follow. Okay. If I want to be a leader others desire to follow, what's more important, me getting this task done or doing it in such a way that inspires others to do their very best work and to want to do that together? And
mm.
so I kind of go back to maybe doing a self inventory of, hey, is what you're doing fulfilling your purpose in life? Is it fulfilling a passion that you have to care for others? And if not, figure out ways that you can do that. Even in difficult jobs, I think there are things that we can do to transfer some of that work into areas that fulfill us.
I love that because it lines up. I remember with things that Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, used to always say, Shane, and he always said this. He said, if you find a job that you love, then you never have to work again for the rest of your life. What a great statement. And a little bit of what you're talking about is when you're doing something with purpose and on purpose, then the work that you do doesn't seem like work at all, does it? I've known you to be that kind of guy,
Exactly right.
whether you were an operator in North Carolina or California, or whether you've been working at the support center, uh, you realize that work is just that if there's not purpose behind it. So I think that's significant what you just said. Thanks for sharing that. Um, Also speak to Chick-fil-A's corporate purpose, because I think that probably lines up pretty well with this whole idea of we do it because it's a higher calling, perhaps, Chick-fil-A does it better because we have this purpose behind what we do. What is that Chick-fil-A purpose?
Well, I think you could recite it, but I will help you with that, Ty. But
Yeah.
and just a little context, it came out of the 80s, actually 82, 83. For those of you that were alive back then are aware of what was going on, in 82 was probably one of the greatest recessions our country outside of the Great Depression. It was one of the greatest recessions we had ever experienced. And so as a brand, we came into the early 80s growing as fast as we had ever grown, experiencing tremendous growth. We were building mall locations all across the U.S. Truett Cathy had built our first, what we called home office. It was an office building. It was a $10 million spend that we went to the bank and borrowed. Here's what the kicker was. Interest rates back in the early 80s was 19%. Can you imagine purchasing a building on credit and
Mhm.
paying 19% in interest? Well, then the floor fell out. The recession hit, sales dropped. People started lining up for gas. I mean, it was bad. And this was at the time Truett said, we need to, what do you do as a corporate team when things are bad? You take a retreat. You go on a retreat and you go, okay, how are we going to right the ship? What are we going to do? How are we going to grow this thing? How are we going to get out of this thing? But here's where I think a significant moment happened for Chick-fil-A. And that moment was, I believe it was Dan Cathy that asked the question, why are we in business really? What's the purpose of all of this? And it took them off of thinking about how we're going to get out of this mess to the bigger question, which ended up being our corporate purpose. And it's this: to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all He's entrusted us, and to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. And it's pretty simple. And it's been a guiding framework for the decisions moving forward. Is this going, whatever we decide to do, is this going to help us accomplish our purpose? To be good stewards of everything we've been given and to have a positive influence on all those that come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Well, when you come up against things like, hey, should we open on Sundays? Go back to your purpose. Is that being a good, is that having a positive influence on people? Well, think about those team members. The reason we close on Sunday is because it gives all those team members across the U.S. a chance to take a day off, to be with their family, to, engage in church or religious activity, whatever that is for them. It allows them the opportunity to do that. And so, again, we go back to that corporate purpose almost weekly, and it really does drive some of the decisions we make. So if you go back to what we talked about earlier, why in the world would we esteem to be the world's most caring company? Because it's our purpose. We've been given a lot, and too much is given, much is required. So we got to be faithful stewards of this brand. And at the same time, we've got a responsibility to have a positive influence on the world. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, let's do what we can only do, which is we can care for people.
Mm.
We can restore people. We can be a place of restoration for people. And if we do that, everything else will take care of itself. I don't say that flippantly. I truly do believe that if we do the right things and we genuinely care for people, I think people see through that. I think people see that for what it is, that we genuinely do care, and therefore they want to give us their business. And we've been blessed by that.
Wow. Shane, that couldn't have been said any better. And I have to tell you, that was just like we rehearsed. That was
Fantastic,
that
Ty.
was
I'm glad.
amazing. That was just amazing. No, I mean, hey, no kidding. You couldn't have said that any better. And it's really hand in glove, isn't it?
It
That
really is.
idea of that goal of becoming the world's most caring company, it lines up with the purpose. It just makes sense. So as we kind of finish today, Shane, and I thank you so much again for your time. And thank Gina for me too, because I know
I
you,
will.
it was time away from family. But I want you to think, if I'm the listener here, if I'm someone in another organization and I'm hearing, well, that's just Chick-fil-A. That's just how they do things. And that's great that you want to aspire to be the world's most caring company. But what's the application for me?
Mm.
How would you answer that?
I might, as you ask that question, I reflect on a story that Dan Cathy told in the final days of Truett Cathy's life. And one of the final things that Truett said to Dan was, take good care of yourself. Take good care of yourself. He didn't say, like some movie scripts, don't ruin my business. Don't wreck the fortune that we've created. Make sure you take care. He said, take good care of yourself.
Hmm.
And he didn't say, take good care of me. He said, take good care of yourself. Because I think he realized that there are some truths in that. And I think there's some truths in taking good care of yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually. So I just want to encourage each of you to start with you. And if you want to care for others, the first place that starts, you got to take good care of you.
Mm.
And you may have just come through a season that has wrecked your world. You may be out of a job. You may have lost a loved one. Um, you may be having real challenges in your marriage or with your kids. And my encouragement is take good care of yourself. That's where it starts. Get that emotional help that you need. Get a counselor. Listen, I've had a counselor my whole life. Ty, you know how messed up I am. So I do think it's important to take good care of yourself. And out of that becomes the wellspring of life. It really does. And when
Mm.
you're healthy, you can then turn that and direct that towards others. And I think that it kind of starts with each of us. And then from there, be intentional. The second thing I would tell you is spend some time, challenge yourself to get away and spend some time thinking about what is your purpose in these different roles that you play.
Mm.
What's your purpose as an employee? What's your purpose as a spouse, as a parent, as a son or daughter, as a leader? What are those roles and what are your purposes? What's your purpose in each one of those areas of your life? And as you go down that road, I think we begin to discover that work truly is a means to an end.
Yes.
We weren't created to live on this world just to work. We were created to have an impact in people's lives. And that's what each of us, I think, has an opportunity to do. And I think it starts with each of us. So I just encourage you, take care of yourself and then ask yourself, hey, why am I doing this? And how can I
Yeah.
help others?
Yeah. Shane, thank you for those thoughts. Thank you again for sharing your wisdom with us today. And obviously, we continue to hope and pray that Chick-fil-A will continue to be that shining light and that beacon in the world where we need some hope, right? We need some folks that say, you know what? Yeah, we're selling chicken, but we're really in the people business. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. And um, give me a second here, and I'm going to do a quick little trailer, and then I'll get back with you. Okay, my friend?
Thank you.
So, for those that are listening out there, we've just had a chance to talk with Shane Benson, the Senior VP of Operations at Chick-fil-A. And What a great discussion this has been about the value of the principle of showing care and concern for others. And as you lead your organization, we want to challenge you. Think about ways that you can do that, that you can literally take that concept of showing care and concern. And what are some practical ways that you can apply that? And watch what happens when you do. Watch what happens to the world that you affect. Watch what happens to the reactions of the people that you lead. And so we wish you all the best in that endeavor. And from Measured Results Consulting, we say thank you for listening.